30 days remain on our path to the draft. Join us as we continue our countdown to the top 25 prospects. We are set to tap the top 10. And in a few moments, Mike Mayock's countdown to the 25 best prospects in the draft enters the top 10 phase and will include his top 2 defensive ends. Gaines Adams from Clemson, he'll be there. And Nebraska's Adam Carriker. Wasn't on anyone's top 10 list during the season, but an outstanding Senior Bowl week and a good combine performance have helped the Big 12 Defensive Lineman of the Year immensely. And players in his top 25 list. It is now Thursday, which means it's time to hit the top 10.
Well, we're finally here, the top 10 football players, regardless of position, in this year's draft. Now, after Leon Hall, I have a guy that personally I like more than most people do, Adam Carriker, the defensive end from the University of Nebraska. Carriker, 6'6", 292 pounds. He's got the best use of hands of any defensive lineman in the draft. Very strong and very good hand placement. He can play in a 4-3. He can play in a 3-4. He can play anywhere up and down the line of scrimmage in any scheme. And this is a guy that facially reminds me a little bit of Howie Long. How good is life, huh? Through 6, Chris Houston and Leon Hall, the corners. Carriker, the defensive lineman that can play anywhere up and down the line of scrimmage. Gaines Adams, the best pass rusher in the entire draft. And then, of course, Brady Quinn, I've got as the 6th best player in the country.
Charles Davis back with us now. And Charles, a couple of defensive ends there on Mike Mayock's list, including Adam Carriker from Nebraska at number 8, who we pointed out is so versatile, could play any position on that defensive line.
Exactly right. And when I talked with a scouting friend of mine earlier, he thought that Adam Carriker's position in the pros was at defensive tackle. Then we got to see him at the Senior Bowl, and we saw him at the Combine, and they realized he can be a true defensive end because he's a lot more athletic than what people thought. Problem with being a Nebraska player is you get put into a grouping. Big, strong, physical, well-coached. Sometimes they forget about the athleticism. Adam Carriker reminded us. Number 1 in his group in the short shuttle at the Combine. He's also strong, 33 reps in the bench press, and he made 16 tackles for loss last year at Nebraska. So you know he's active along the defensive front.
And while Carriker has shot up the charts to get into the top 10, Clemson's Gaines Adams.
Back in New York, the St. Louis Rams have made their pick. The 8-8 Rams, year 2 under Scott Linehan.
With the 13th pick in the 2007 NFL Draft, the St. Louis Rams select Adam Carriker, defensive end, Nebraska.
Of course, reminiscent a little bit of once upon a time when the St. Louis Rams took a Nebraska defensive end named Grant Wistrom. He's a little bit bigger, but they know exactly what they get with him. This is a team that had offense. Bart Bolger had a huge year, the 4th-ranked passing offensive football, but now 31 against the rush.
You look at him, 6'6", 298 pounds. You watch him here getting in after the quarterback. That's Tyler Palko from Pitt getting the sack there, and I think he really benefited. You watch from a technique standpoint. A couple years with John Blake, their former defensive line coach, one of the best in the business. John Blake developed Leon Leddett with the Dallas Cowboys. He's now under Butch Davis at North Carolina with the Tar Heels, and you watch his ability to get after the quarterback improve. The last 2 years, 9.5 sacks as a junior, 7 this past season, a career-high 52 tackles as well this past year. And the fact of the matter is, he can play defensive end, or he can move inside the defensive tackle. So I think that versatility that Adam Carriker brings to the defensive line position for a St. Louis team that brought in James Hall from Detroit. Now they get a guy who has the ability to play either spot.
And the Rams got pushed around a lot last year under Jim Haslett, their defensive coordinator. And I know Haslett's been in that building saying defense, defense, defense. And Carriker was a safe guy. Some people said, well, you know, his ceiling isn't that high. You know, a guy who hold up against the run, who's got good enough speed to get to the quarterback when necessary. They, too, are building a base, trying to rebuild that defense.
Again, a dome team that recognizes if I can put pressure on the quarterback at home with the noise, I can win a lot of football games. And I really believe that if I was the general manager of our team in the dome, that's my pick. I want a defensive lineman that can get off the ball at home.
Not only that, St. Louis knows that they're in a division where they throw the football an awful lot.
One thing about Adam Carriker we should point out, we had this with Jamal Anderson, right? He was a different sort of player. Adam Carriker was a high school senior quarterback in Kennewick, Washington. So he's kind of gone over, as our good friend Brian Billick would say, to the dark side.
And he's got good character, too.
Carriker has good character. Say that 3 times fast. Absolutely. So, the next
2 linemen starting a fist fight during a pass play in which they blew a block while Trent Edwards was getting hit.
So that's the type of mess that Trent Edwards
Would you
had to play
repeat
in.
that? What happened?
A offensive coordinator said he's got tape that shows 2 offensive linemen at Stanford starting to get into a fist fight when they blew their blocks as Trent Edwards was getting hit. That's the mess of a program that Edwards was playing in, even though it was a well-designed offense.
Not a way to try to protect your quarterback.
Yes.
That's quite a way to
With each other.
Well, we get to the bottom now of round number 2, and we just had a couple of picks here. Chicago, and this was San Diego's spot. We're going to review the trade in a minute. They took Daniel Bazine, defensive end from Central Michigan. So there were a lot of eyebrows raised when San Diego made this as we wrap up the second round in a minute with a couple of picks. Just in case you were scoring at home, rounds 1 and 2, 9 hours and 20 minutes. Where would you rather be than right here, right now, to quote Marvel, right? Look at these fans. 9 hours and 20 minutes in the first 2 rounds, and we're just steamrolling into the third. Now, let's go back to the second to last pick of the second round, because the Green Bay Packers, team that lost Amon Green, they got a running back. So the Packers pick Brandon Jackson, running back Nebraska. And Keyshawn, I give you the nod. You pointed out, hey, they had success with Amon Green, Nebraska.
Could be
They
something.
traded from Seattle. Let's try another Nebraska back. So Brandon Jackson, late second. Value, Mel?
Shoulder injuries hampered him. Then Nebraska had a stable of running backs. He was a forgotten man. First 5 games this year, does hardly anything. Then he comes on late in the year, had some huge games. Oklahoma State, Colorado, runs wild, shows speed, shows game-breaking ability, caught the ball very effectively out of the backfield. Very little tread on those tires. Got a lot of momentum late. Comes out after his junior year. Very little productivity except late in the season. And now you're rolling the dice based on what you saw over the last 6 or 7 games of the year. If this kid has the ability to come into the NFL for a team, it's going to give him an opportunity, obviously, the Green Bay Packers, to run with the football.
Well, somebody I trust on running back evaluations, and the Packers were looking at Marshawn Lynch of Cal as a possible first-round pick. He went before them. They told me about this kid. He's a great kid, came from a tough family background, overcome a lot, was in a rotation, as you know, did this came out for financial reasons, has been coached hard by Bill Callahan there in Nebraska, similar type system. He's going to run in Green Bay, has great character, perfectionist. I was told he would stay on a practice field for an hour if it was just to work on a technique. Great vision, great cutback. I think it's a great
I was
fit.
probably happy with it. A guy that came up to say hello to us before the draft who was here. Jim Taylor, who was a pretty decent running back for the Green Bay Packers, the Hall of Famer. He's probably thrilled his whole team drafted a running back in the second round. Now, Tampa